If there was ever going to be an episode that I just get banned for or that I get canceled for, it's probably this one. Today we're talking about men, masculinity, and warfare. I'm Chad Garrett. This is The Chad Garrett Show. There is a will to fight inside of every man. For whatever reason, this fact seems to be controversial in our modern day, even though it is central to what it means to be a man, is to having this will to fight. And yet part of our present culture not only doesn't want to accept this, but is openly attacking that very manhood. And today we're going to talk about why they're attacking it, how they attack it, and what it means to be a man and where that necessity comes from. And I'm not pulling from a bunch of other sources. I'm not pulling from a bunch of different literature. Today we're talking about common sense, historical reflection, and what it takes to understand where we are and where we are going if we don't fix this thing. So, to start off against this attack, how does society decide that it wants, or the culture decide that it wants to attack men and masculinity and manhood? Well, one way is by being told that the desire for strength is a part of the patriarchy. And that if you're a part of the patriarchy and part of the system, that you're oppressive to women and that you are somehow devaluing what it means to be a woman and that women don't matter as much as men do because men are men and men are trying to take over the world and do man things and they have for thousands of years. Really, bro? That's your best argument? Let's go on to another one before I start ripping these things apart. Masculinity is toxic, and this includes chivalry. That's another attack, is they use this term toxic masculinity, which realistically isn't a term that has existed up into the 21st century. And it really means nothing. It's one of those terms that suffers from semantic overload because no one wants to actually define what it is that they mean by toxic masculinity. It's a label that they throw on anything that a man does that they decide that they don't like. And so in doing so, they are able to perpetrate this ideal of evil from all men anywhere doing anything that somehow decides to undermine that group or that individual's desires and their beliefs and what it is that they want to accomplish. And I don't mean accomplish in a good way. I don't want you to think that this is something how I want to devalue women and the women don't belong in the workplace. They're barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, right? Like that's not who I am at all. If you're a woman, go get yours. Be strong. You live in the land of opportunity. You live in the greatest time period that there has ever been to be a woman because you have more rights, more freedoms, and more ability to go do things than you have ever had in your life. Go do them, go use them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to attack men for being men in the process. The third thing is that men desire to fight and protect, and this desire is oppressive and evil and must be squelched. That's the third big attack that the radical culture decides that it wants to press upon us. So let's get a few things straight. How about the first one, that men are inclined to violence and warfare? There are outliers. There are men that don't like to fight. And this doesn't just mean physically fight. This is talking about being argumentative. This is talking about being hard-headed. This is the desire even to hunt, whether that be for survival or for sport. There is an element of manhood that desires to be the predator and to have a prey. If this is in warfare, it's very obvious that it is the opposing side. If this is in life, wherever you are going hunting for food, it's that way too. This even applies to a man's desire to chase a woman. And that doesn't have to be oppressive or weird or evil. It's part of the natural array of things of wanting to have a mate and desiring a mate and going out and pursuing that. What we run into is when we run into a problem there is whenever we don't instill the virtues that are necessary to channel this want for warfare and violence, this chase, this idea of wanting to set your sights on a goal, whether that be a woman that you desire, or whether that be an animal that you saw on a trail cam, or that you saw in the woods, or whether that be the enemy that you're trying to beat in a sports game. We're going to get to all of these things, but it's a matter of how you channel these things that makes them good or evil. It is not the desire itself that is at the core of being a man that makes these things evil. And society is so quick to forget that. So I also find that society is really quick to forget, by some of the best non-Christian historical methods, right? You would say like 30,000 years, 35,000 years worth of human existence plagued by warfare. And you might say, well, that's a part of the patriarchy too. Men are the ones that have been promulgating these fights and these wars since the beginning of time, and it's always been men that have gone off and fought, and they've always kept women from fighting. And if you really believe that men and women are equal, women had just as much potential to influence the course of history and to make history a matriarchy as much as men had the opportunity to make it a patriarchy. This whole promulgation of this narrative that women have been oppressed since the beginning of time is quite wild to me, because if you truly believe that men and women are created equal, then women had just as much shot at running the world up until this point as men did. The big issue here is that we forget that women are designed for a specific purpose and men are designed for a specific purpose, and that does not intrinsically make them less valuable than each other in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Being unique in your role, in what you are called to, and what you are physically capable of doing does not devalue someone. Doesn't devalue an entire sex. Sure as hell doesn't devalue over the course of history. And historically speaking, it has been men that fight. One of the greatest examples of this is ancient Sparta. They had massive respect for their women, and yet it was still the men that went and fought. But it was the women that looked at the men with pride and tears of sorrow, but also with authority, and said, "Come back with your shield or on it." Now, from a historical perspective, one of the things that this means is whenever you would die in battle, it doesn't mean that your blood would be particularly spattered on your shield. How they got the soldiers home is they would use the same shield interlocking technique of the phalanx, and they would rest the bodies of their fallen on the shields, and they would carry them back to Sparta on the shields. Think about that. The miles they had to walk, and yet they would still bring them home. Men did that. And women desired it. Is it toxic to take pride like that? Is it toxic to want to go and fight for whatever it might be that you want to fight? We'll get to the things that men want to fight for in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. So here's a question. Over the course of history, why not women? Well, answer number one is that men are physiologically more adept at being brutal towards each other and knocking each other out and breaking each other's stuff and are just more inclined because of our violent nature to slit each other's throats wide open. The show Peaky Blinders has a fantastic scene where Paulie sits down with a character named Grace and he says, "No, we're not like them. We're more civilized." Right? Knowing that if it were the boys of the Peaky Blinders gang, that they'd have been punching each other and pulling guns and trying to kill each other. And she says, "No, we're more civilized. We're going to sit down and we're going to have a drink and we're going to talk about this." But you don't see anyone talking about how that is promoting the patriarchy. Here's another big fact, one that modern society is so willing to forget. Women have a freaking superpower. They can do something that literally no man in history can do. It's called growing a human child inside of them, bringing new life into the world. And if that is not a superpower, if that is not something that you think should be protected, if you don't think that ability is why women haven't been allowed to go into combat, because we need someone at home who can continue the human race should we all die. If you don't think that being able to protect the ability to bring new life into this world, if that is something worth fighting for and creating rules around, then I think that you as an individual and us as a society especially have our priorities backward, extremely backward. Because there is no greater power that we have been given by God than the ability to bring new life into this world. Only women have the ability to do that. I want to talk about importance, something worth protecting. This need to fight and this inclination towards violence is still prevalent today. It doesn't just go into the history of warfare and everything like that. As we've begun to get more civilized as a society, naturally there is still warfare. Modern day weapons have been the great equalizer. It's one of the reasons why women have now been able to enter some combat roles. But you still see this violent nature of men promulgated in other places. Where, Chad? Thanks for asking, I'll tell you. How about Hollywood? Why is it that there's so much violence in movies? Why is it that the big blockbusters are things like the Marvel shows that have typically a resounding cast of men, although there was that one scene in Endgame where they had like full-on girl power and all the girl superheroes come through and they start wrecking face? Why is it that most of the superheroes that are beating the ever-living dickens out of each other, why are they all men? Mostly. Right? You had a few, right? The Black Widow, Scarlet Witch. When I look at the Bond movies or the Jason Bourne movies, I look at the movie Tenet. When I look at Avatar, even, right? Or these other things, it's mostly men doing the fighting. Okay, but those movies are made for everyone, and everyone enjoys the Hollywood violence that's going on. It's like, okay, let's talk about video game violence. Why is it that most video games are hyper violent in a lot of ways? Let's talk about Doom. Let's talk about Baldur's Gate. Let's talk about Halo. Let's talk about Call of Duty, for the love of God, right? Why are there entire video game series called MOBAs, massive online battle arenas where you get a team of 5 people and your entire job is to try and kill your opponent and break their stuff. Literally, go into their base and destroy their base. Where do you think that comes from? Battle royales where you drop 100 people into an island and the entire purpose is to kill each other and be the last one standing. Why do you think that all of that is directed mostly at boys and young men? Why is it that in the year 2020, based on statistical evidence, that 60% of all video game players, that includes mobile phone players, are men? If that's not enough for you, how about modern day sports? Football, extremely violent. Rugby, extremely violent. Boxing, MMA. There are even elements of baseball and hockey, especially hockey. Lord almighty, like you actually have full-on like ice brawls is one of the things that it's known for. And people just getting their faces smashed up against the plexiglass. But even things like basketball and soccer and baseball that are less directly violent still have this whole idea of us versus them associated to it. Marathons are and track runners that run marathons and such are based off of the Battle of Marathon, where the Greeks faced off against the Persians, won a knockout victory when they were outnumbered 10-1, and yet they had one guy run back to Athens from the city of Marathon, the whole 23 miles, said one word, means victory, Nike, and he collapsed and died. So even running traces its roots back to warfare. It is so easy to forget how much of our society is based on the contributions of those that were willing to go and fight and die. But not only has our society developed out of these things, but violence is a good thing. And if that's not enough to keep you sticking around until after the commercials, I don't know what is. But now I got to take a quick break, and thank you guys so much for joining me on this journey in this episode. This episode is extremely necessary, as are all of our talks, and I hope that you guys are having a ton of fun with this, as am I. This episode in particular has really been weighing heavy on my heart for a couple of weeks now, and so it's so awesome that you guys get to be a part of this and that I get to share my thoughts on this matter with all of you. Thank you so much for being here. If you like the content that we've been putting out, we have over, I would say, 20 hours worth of content for you guys now, not including our articles and such. If you're enjoying our content, please, please, please like and subscribe anywhere and everywhere that you can, and please leave us a 5-star review on Facebook and Apple iTunes. That's at Forerunner Productions or Chad W. Garrett. Either one works. Both of them would be best. And at the Forerunner Productions page on iTunes. You don't know how much that helps. Also, share us with your friends. This thing is grassroots as it gets. That's how we get the word out. That's how we get more people on board to changing the culture and realizing that you have gifts as men, as women, as children, as people, as a society. We are given gifts by God, and we are given those gifts not to keep for ourselves, but to give them back into the world and inspire others to do the same. And by doing that, we will make the world a better place. If you want to check us out on Patreon, where you can support us financially for as little as $1, please do that as well. You have no idea how much it helps. We're in the beginning stages of this company. We have new books that are getting ready to come out. We have articles that are coming out almost weekly at this point. with great content. We just brought on a new content creator for you. She is immensely talented. She is Strength of Atlantis Photography. She's done a lot of my photography for the pictures that you guys see of me. She is coming on, and when you subscribe to the $10 or $20 amount, you get 10% with a $10 monthly subscription, or 20% with a $20 monthly subscription off of her prints. So she does professional, limited edition prints. There are only, I think, total with all the different sizes, like a maximum of 30 of each print that is ever made, and her artwork is fantastic. So if you want 10% off or 20% off of those amazing things, make sure that you go onto Patreon and subscribe at the $10 a month or $20 a month limit. You're going to get all sorts of other things included in that. You get exclusive access, early access. You get the articles, bloopers, extended interviews when we do Impetus Minds of the Driven. There's so many benefits to you guys going and subscribing. So you have to go on to patreon.com/Forerunner. Again, that's patreon.com/Forerunner. Okay. How could violence possibly be a good thing? Violence, especially that is inherent in it's central really to what men are and who we are designed to be, and it is a very good thing when we also teach men the virtues and the ethics that are worth fighting for. Things like justice, hearth and home. If you want to go old school, you could say king and country. Nowadays, I think that it's best to talk about freedom and peace. Anyone who's ever served in the military or that has two eyes and half a brain will tell you that freedom isn't free. It's something that we as a country have had to fight for over and over again, even through our own history, not just since 1776 and the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War. Let's talk about the Civil War. Let's talk about the Civil Rights Movement. We've had to fight for our freedoms as a people to get closer to that golden core as a country that was set out in the Declaration of Independence over and over and over again. It was strong men that made these fights, good men who fought for these things. With all of their flaws, sure. Good men. Peace. Why does it seem contradictory to be inclined to violence if you're trying to be violent for peace? Yes, it's a little bit contradictory. Let's be honest here. On its face, it's a little bit contradictory. But there are so many people, there are so many countries, there are so many groups of radicals and terrorists out there that want to do you harm simply because you are alive. Whether it be because you're an American, whether it be in certain countries that there's still massive amounts of racism. Even in our own country, there are people that still have racist tendencies, and that's a horrible and sad thing. Sometimes it takes violence to make the change that needs to happen. But we have to be able to filter that violent tendency through the proper virtues so that we don't just go breaking stuff and killing people willy-nilly in the streets for no damn reason. But you know the thing that is the most virtuous that I find? The thing that inspires time and time again the most necessary call for violence? Love. Whether it be love for a brother, love for your family, love for a woman. Love is one of the greatest manifestations of the human heart. And it should be the one that we should go quickest to protect. It's also one of history's greatest manifestations. It comes out of love. It's this thing called chivalry. And chivalry is now being painted as toxic masculinity. And why is that? There's this whole narrative that goes around now that says, well, women don't need saving, right? Part of chivalry isn't just living by a code of honor, but also like the idea of like saving the damsel in distress, right? It's what the knight in shining armor coming on a snow white stallion to save the damsel from the dragon or from the evil king, right? It's this idea, I'm going to live by a code of honor. I'm going to treat women how they should be treated as, in a Christian sense, this is like treat women as the lesser vessel. And that doesn't mean that women are lesser, right? Like this whole idea that Christianity does that thing just infuriates me. That's for another podcast. No, it's this idea that women don't need saving, that women don't want you to fight for them, and that women can save and defend themselves. Okay, say all of that's true. I won't even try and argue that point. Say every last bit of that's true. What if men need something worth fighting for? What if this call to fight and struggle and to be willing to die for something is so inherent in our being and so bred into our DNA and what it means to be a man, that need for affirmation? What if we need something worth fighting for? And what if there is nothing... I'm not even going to give you a what if. There is nothing in this world that is worth fighting for more than love. The need to fight, it exists in every man. Remove the things worth fighting for, and men will still fight. They'll just fight over the wrong things. And the outcome will be absolutely devastating. Or men will become like lions in a cage. We'll thrash against our captivity for a short time. But then that desire to hunt and chase, the desire to fight, it will fade from our eyes like the stars do in the sky. And all that will be left are docile kittens that have rolled over and are waiting to die. Not while I draw breath. But we must take heed. We have to learn that these things that our culture and society teach us are evil and wrong can, and for much of history, have been good. They are here for a reason. And we must learn to channel them in the proper ways to protect the things that are most passionate that are most important to us, and that we are most passionate about. These are the narratives of our lives. We got to pay attention to them. I'm Chad Garrett. This is the Chad Garrett Show.